So I'm your warm-up act this morning. I don't really like to talk about stuff in the past, but I thought, I was curious why Patrick asked me to share a little bit about my past experience at AirAsia X, and I guess while it has nothing to do with digital technology, it's your very traditional oil economy, heavy capex, grease under your fingernails business. There might be some interesting parallels to share in terms of how we started it off back in 2007 when it was just a business plan, an Excel spreadsheet, nothing more, pitched, raising funds, and then launched, and eventually in 2013 took it for an IPO. I'm also very conscious that post-IPO, it has really gone down the tube without me. And happy to share, I think, also some very important lessons learned in the process in terms of what doesn't work and the very reasons that startups and disruptive businesses can shake up traditional incumbents. But when you get to that stage, when you're big and established and you start being more risk averse, those same issues you now face on the other side. But essentially, in summary, if you think about it, what we're doing is very, very similar to all of the amazing disruptive businesses that we've been hearing about at this conference. AirAsia X was really about just having one single focus, going after an underserved segment, namely the long-haul portion of a low-cost airline business, starting with a very minimum viable product, but constantly, rapidly iterating different new product features, and importantly, through observing customer behavior rather than asking customers. So we're not fans of surveys, but really just looking at innate behaviors and coming up with new features that no one in the industry had really thought about. But in that process, not everything that we come up with works. There's a lot of things that fail, and you just got to learn very, very fast from that process. And also equally, challenging a lot of the beliefs that got you successful for the first few years may no longer be relevant and applicable down the line. So the big challenge with going long haul is that unlike the short haul business, this is a business where day one, when you compete, you're going against big global giants. You've got the Cathay, Singapore Airlines, Qantas, British Airways, American Airlines. And that's part of the reason why everyone in the airline industry said, this is an impossible thing to do. Why? Because firstly, this isn't the first attempt. From way back in the 1970s, Freddie Laker tried with Laker Airways, People Express in the US in the 1980s. Even right before us in Asia, Oasis Hong Kong tried to do low-cost flights from Hong Kong to London, and they've all, without fail, failed. On top of that, all the big successful low-cost carriers, the Southwest, EasyJets, Ryanairs, all said, we don't do this. This is not part of the model. The only way this model works from our experience is using small planes flying short distances. So the big successful players all said, this doesn't work. In fact, even AirAsia themselves, the board and shareholders, did not believe in this idea. And that was why AirAsia X was created as a separate company, because the core AirAsia business did not want to have anything to do with it. So it literally was a business where we had to raise our own risk capital, private equity investments, and actually lease or license the AirAsia brand and website, the use of AirAsia.com, paying AirAsia a royalty fee. Basically operating as a standalone airline on the strength of our own balance sheet, no parental guarantees from AirAsia from day one. So it was in this context of how everyone in the industry did not believe that you could do this. And interestingly, the main challenge was this view that as you go long haul, you can no longer have a big cost advantage the way a short haul low cost carrier has a unit cost advantage over the full service counterparts in the short haul space. And for some reason, a couple of things. So this is where sometimes looking at things differently, coming from outside the industry, can shed a different light. Most people came to this conclusion from the industry, and all these experts, with 30, 40 years experience said, if we looked at a typical curve of flight distance and unit cost, after flying 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, that line starts to taper off. So the longer you go, there is no longer a cost advantage. But part of that thinking, the problem with that thinking was they were basing it on same set of assumptions on how you use the airplane. And so this is the big sort of breakthrough insight that we got was the fact that when you look at long-haul airlines, all Cathay Pacific, Singapore Airlines, they also have these big all-white body jet fleets. And interestingly, you can Google Cathay Pacific's annual report, and you'll see this line that says average aircraft utilization 12 hours. What it means is all these airlines, they spend huge amounts of money buying planes. Each plane is about $100 million US. And they're using it 50% of the time. Only 50% of the time the planes are in the air, and 50% of the time it's on the ground. And it seems like, shocking if you think about any major capital-intensive product, whether it's data centers, power plants running at a 50% utilization rate. But that's exactly what airlines around the world were doing. And the reason for that is all of these airlines, if you think about it, they're premium airlines. And they focus on the passengers at the front end of the cabin, right? So for example, a typical first class, business class configuration may only represent 18% of the seats on board a plane, yet they generate about 40% of revenues and sometimes 60% of profits for a full service carrier. That's why they're very focused on the passengers in the front end. And for these passengers, the main focus for them is convenience, right? And that's why departure and arrival times, connecting times are geared towards, what's best for those passengers. For the rest of us who are at the back of the plane, we're an afterthought. And so they designed flight schedules for the convenience of these passengers. I'll give you an example. We fly to Sydney, or AirAsia flies to Sydney late at night, leaving Kuala Lumpur, arriving in Sydney early morning. Malaysia Airlines does the same. They fly late at night and get there early in the morning. But in AirAsia's case, as with every destination, within 60 to 75 minutes, the plane flies back immediately. But that Malaysia Airlines plane stays on the ground at Sydney Airport for about 4 to 6 hours. Why? Because business passengers don't want to wake up early in the morning at 5 o'clock in the morning to rush to the airport to catch an early morning flight out. They want a more convenient time. And the other thing is, by keeping the plane on the ground, I just realized, hi, how are you? Someone from Malaysia Airlines. You're like, that's not true. So, but anyway, you can check the flight schedules, right? So the plane departs after lunch to come back to KL at night, right? 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. Why? Because it's the perfect connecting time for flights to Europe, to London, to Paris. That feeder connection is hugely important, but more importantly, because premium passengers demand convenient connecting times, right? Where you've checked in from Sydney, you've got your boarding pass to London, your bags are going to check through, you arrive in KL gate 37, you just walked over to gate 34, boom, off you go. That level of convenience requires planes to be on the ground a lot longer. Basically, planes end up waiting for passengers. Another very interesting example is a flight from KL to London, or Singapore to London for that matter, is about 13 hours. Even if you could turn around the plane very, very fast in 1 hour to refuel it, a round trip would be 27 hours. But somehow airlines all say your departure times must be the same time every day of the week, right? And for you regular travelers, you probably know, I'm going to take SQ002 that departs at 23:45 to London. But by just making sure that you have a convenient, consistent schedule, you're effectively using more than one plane a day, right? And that's why you need a lot more of the physical assets, and that's why there's a big utilization. So the math was very simple. By removing that constraint, and for example, flights to Hangzhou. Monday we left in the morning, Tuesday in the afternoon, Wednesday in the evening, basically maximizing the utilization. We could run and operate the world's highest aircraft utilization pattern at about 17 hours a day. So 17 versus 12, basically for the same cost of a brand new plane, you're getting a good 35–40% more use. And every flight actually has 30% more seats because we don't use up a lot of real estate for first class, business class. And by being able to put more seats in, effectively means every flight having 30% more seats, that plane flying 30–40% more flights in a year, suddenly, by doing nothing else, your unit cost comes down by half. And so that was the big difference, because the mental block for the whole industry was they were measuring how many flights per day can you fly, right? And in short haul, I get it, because you do these quick 25-minute turnarounds, you can put in 8 flights a day versus, a Singapore Airlines maybe doing 5 or 6 flights a day. That's how they get a cost advantage. But once you fly long haul, you can't do 8 flights a day. So surely this model doesn't work. And the simple problem was solved by just redefining that metric from flights per day to flights per year, right? And when you actually change that metric to flights per year, you can actually get the same 35–40% more flights compared to a traditional full-service airline. So that just gives you a unit cost comparison of AirAsia X, even with a tiny subscale operation being less than half the unit cost of Emirates, Cathay Pacific, Lufthansa, obviously European labor costs. So on one hand, that was good, but if you just rest on your laurels, it wasn't difficult for anyone to replicate that model. It's not easy, it's not difficult to say, that's, look at our flight schedules, that's how you get more flights in a year. Look at the seat map on a plane, that's how they put more seats in the year. Exactly. It's a very easy model to replicate. In fact, that's kind of what Singapore Airlines did. When we first launched, I remember in 2007, David, you might remember this, the former CEO of Singapore Airlines went on record, public record, to say, this whole long-haul thing is rubbish. We, Singapore Airlines, we know what it takes to fly long-haul. We know passengers are going to insist on having their meals and the entertainment, and the idea that that's not provided as part of the bundle is preposterous, right? And it's just going to be a matter of days or weeks before these crazy Malaysians fail. And that was when we first started. 5 years on, I guess the Singaporeans, being very diligent people, took a lot of copious notes, looked at what we were doing, and eventually decided to launch the same exact replica. They just changed it from red to yellow, hired our commercial director, and off they went. So if your idea is easily replicable, then how do you prevent someone from overtaking you with a lot more resources? Singapore Airlines had a lot more money. So the whole thing was constantly coming up with new features, right? Always staying ahead of the game, so that while the Singaporeans are busy trying to figure out what you're doing today, you're already thinking about what you're doing 2 years, 3 years out. Many things that we've done. I'll just share some examples. People thought we were crazy to launch flatbed business class seats, the first low-cost airline in the world to do so. And their idea was simple. Everyone, thought that business class, every airline in the world, business class meant full-service lounges, champagne, all these great food that you justify. But we felt there was a segment of people who wanted the comfort of the seat, the flatbed seat, with a pillow and blanket, but without all that extra frills, and to be able to charge a fraction of a business class fare. In fact, similar to a full fare economy flight on Singapore Airlines. So suddenly, those KrisFlyer points may not be as attractive anymore. And it's really taken off, despite people saying, you're bastardizing the low-cost model. Surely, this is going to add a lot more cost and complexity, yet still remaining the world's lowest unit cost airline, with a lower unit cost than the airlines who are saying, we're the purebred low-cost model. We won't do any of these crazy things that AirAsia X does. Other interesting ideas, and this comes back to observing customer behavior. I'm surprised no one else has figured this one out. You know how it is for the few of you who still fly economy. When you sit on a long-haul flight and you hope and pray that nobody sits next to you so that you've got all 3 seats in a row to stretch out. Murphy's Law, usually, someone will come and sit next to you. But, you see that row next to you that's empty, so you know the drill. The moment the seatbelt sign goes off, poof, you claim it with your sweater and your book and your bag. Make sure that's your territory. So just observing this, we know this because we're flyers too, right? And we thought, interesting. How do we monetize this? Why don't we, we create a financial option. We call it an empty seat option. The way it works is very simple. For a small fee, because we're AirAsia, and it's dynamically priced, right? So either $10, $20, $30, you have a chance, not a guarantee, that you get all 3 seats in a row to yourself. So the way it works is by the time you check in, if on that day there are extra seats, you get it assigned, we tell you, yay, your option has struck gold, you get all 3 seats in a row, you're going to be super happy. But if on that day, all the seats are sold, we refund you back your $10 or $20, right? And so it's a way of basically creating a whole new revenue stream that goes straight to the bottom line because there's actually no cost of producing it. These seats would have flown empty. Funny, AirAsia still hasn't figured this one out yet. But, it's only available on AirAsia X. Just some other, big thoughts thinking about this strategically as well is, we thought the whole idea of, you start with saying low-cost airlines are all about only point-to-point simple connections. Until we realized through observation that on our very first flight to the Gold Coast, about 50% of our passengers were the Australians from the Gold Coast coming up to KL, but 80% of them were not ending their journey in Kuala Lumpur. They came with their surfboards and everything. They would come to Kuala Lumpur, wait, check in for the next flight, whether it was to Bali or to Sumatra to catch the surf or to get up to Bangkok and Phuket. And they were doing this on their own. And we realized, despite the fact that every low-cost carrier in the world was religious about not providing connecting flights, we said, how difficult would it do to make it a bit more convenient for passengers so that they can book 2 segments at the same time, their bags being tagged in a different color so when it arrives in Kuala Lumpur, we can move it to the next flight and then bypass immigration and customs so that you go straight to the next flight. If any of you remember the old low-cost carrier terminal? Have you ever gone through it? Okay, very few. Interesting. Yeah, all those memories, very scarred. If you remember when you come out from international arrivals, when you go up the escalator to the immigration office, there's actually a transfer desk before that escalator right on the left-hand side, which actually goes straight to the departure lounge. That didn't exist. We literally had to convince Malaysia Airport to break that wall and create a simple path for arriving passengers from Gold Coast to go through this transfer gate to get to the departure gate straight for their flights to Bali or Phuket. And the whole idea became one where we created a connecting model that by 2014, 53% of AirAsia X's passengers were connecting. So if we had not challenged that convention, we probably wouldn't have grown as fast as we did. But lastly, I just wanted to wrap up with a lot of big, huge mistakes as well. This one's one of my favorites. When we launched, we thought we'd be smart and creative by being the first or one of the first low-cost airlines to have a full in-seat, in-flight entertainment systems on every economy seat. This was an actual AirAsia X plane. It had the latest digital touchscreen technology. It even had instant messaging, which was very popular. So if you're bored on a long-haul flight and you kind of like or fancy that person on 13G, you're like, hi 13G, I'm at 27F, nice to meet you. That part was really popular. Turns out what wasn't really popular for flights, especially 50% of the flights being late night flights, is trying to sell movies. Because most people would rather sit on a plane for 8 hours watching that little plane go around the globe than actually watching a movie. Interestingly, when we even offered it for free just to test price elasticity, less than 30% of people were watching movies or entertainment at night because most of them wanted to go to sleep. Yet Hollywood charges an exorbitant amount of money for licensing fees because they don't trust you to declare how many people watch movies, so they charge you per screen, per seat, per flight. That's a lot of money, right? And you're burning a lot of stuff. So to cut a long story short, we scrapped all of this and eventually replaced them with simple Samsung Galaxy tablets for rent. So you know, okay, day flight from Sydney, let's have 60 units. Night flight from Sydney, you need 20 units. Any flight to or from China, don't bother because they're never going to pay any money for content. Data. It's data-based. You know, so once you have enough data, you can make these decisions. So if you can see, just basically in a nutshell, you know, creating a disruptive model, even in the old traditional economy, still uses and applies the same principles that that we use in our digital businesses today, in terms of that singular focus, constant iteration, using data and customer observation, and just not being afraid to make mistakes. So that's our little story. Thank you very much.